Oh man, I'll tell you what. These are as good a stories as anyone's ever going to hear, and they are true. The first one I'm going to start with is a near-death experience. When I was a kid, a long time ago, 5 years old, my mother found a pediatrician. I know his name is, let's see, what was his name? Alvin Romer, because he has a memorial bench outside of his office in Green Hills, so I still know his names. Every time I go by that door, it's where his office used to be. I shiver a little bit, which Anyway, he wasn't a very good doctor, and I've got this birthmark that is a part of my vascular system, and it can't be removed. It'd be like trying to remove my vascular system, but I suppose he thought it was something else, and he found a surgeon that was equally incompetent as he was, because I'm sure he's dead now. I mean, we're talking a long time ago. We're talking 53 years ago. But anyway, the surgeon was as incompetent as him, so they decided to remove my birthmark, even though it was something impossible to do. Anyway, I'm on the table, and apparently they've been doing this for 5 hours. My mom told me they were doing this for 5 hours. Probably at that time, it was just at the back of my neck here. You can see the scar. But now it's over here on the side of my neck, and it's all down my shoulders and it's up on top of my head. But it was probably just in one spot then, because that probably gave them the confidence that they could remove it. So anyway, eyeballs deep in medical incompetence. They kill me by accident. So what happens is you pop out of your body very fast and you float up. And I was right next to the surgical lights, and I didn't feel any heat at all. So I guess when you're dead, you don't feel heat. It's just the opposite of what you hear in the Bible about suffering with the enormous heat in hell. But apparently that's not the way it is. You don't feel heat. But you know right away you can go through a solid object. So I decided to go see my mom and my uncle in the waiting room. So I just floated over to the waiting room, and there they were. They were looking pretty worried. And this is the thing about these near-death experiences. I don't trust anyone, having had experience it myself. I don't trust anybody that tells a story that's any longer than about 3 minutes, because when I went over to see my mom, I realized that I had to go back to where my body was, because I only had a few minutes to make a decision whether I wanted to go back into it or stay out of it. So I flew back to where my body was, and I was right next to the surgical lights again, and thinking about whether I should go in or not. And this is an interesting thing about this, is that when you look at your body and you're outside of it, and you're that close to death, and you really can't get that closer than that, your body looks like garbage. It looks like absolute trash. And you don't care that it's going to turn purple and rot. You pop out of it in a second, and it's something that you used to have, and it just doesn't matter to you. But anyway, so I'm over the surgical lights, next to the surgical lights, and I'm wondering whether I should go back or not. My body looks like a world of pain, whereas I knew I could shoot through the roof and go flying 100 miles an hour, which was would be a lot of fun. And I even though I didn't see another person when this was happening, I had the feeling that I was going on to something better, and which is probably true, because I knew I could go through walls, and I think probably what I thought is probably the way it actually is, because at that stage you probably have a little higher consciousness, and you know what it's going to be like just from crossing over. So I was thinking, my body looks like a lot of pain, and I felt like I was going to go into a better thing. I didn't feel like I would be lonely, and I knew that I could shoot through the roof and fly. and it was pretty tempting. You see, when you get that close to death, it becomes seductive. When you're, like now when you're alive and, just experiencing normal life, you have a lot of anxiety about death, and you have a adrenal system that goes off to protect you in this life. You get excited, you get more capable of fighting back when you go into a state of adrenaline, which your body has to protect you. But when you're that close, it's something totally different. It's like, ooh, you're going on to something better. You can fly. It's very seductive. You want to do it. So anyway, I was there. I was floating over the table, and the doctors and the nurses were just like frantically working on me. And I was kind of thinking, why are they working on me so frantically? Because when you're outside your body, you have a real sort of serene, sort of calm feeling. And you have the feeling, you're not losing that much. And I was thinking about it, and I said, well, if I die, it's going to upset my mother quite a lot. But then I thought that she would be here, where I was, fairly quickly, which is an interesting sort of feeling, because maybe like 90 years or 80 years or 100 years doesn't seem like that much time in the next dimension that you go into. But anyway, I guess that you have a tendency to choose life even when you're that close to going on to something that you almost certainly feel is going to be better. So I decided to go in my body, so I went back in there. And boy, I'll tell you what, I was right about it being garbage and full of pain and so forth, because after the surgery was over, I woke up and I couldn't move at all. They had been, drilling for oil in the back of my neck, which would have made it so difficult probably to move anyway. But they also gave me an infection. I had this awful infection. It was extremely painful. The surgery was, where my neck was extremely painful, and I was, crapping everywhere because the infection gave me diarrhea. So I was totally helpless to move, having diarrhea constantly, and in a lot of pain. And before that, I was a 5-year-old kid that had an odd birthmark, but was perfectly healthy, was running around and enjoying their life. So, it was the doctors, they did this to me, and it really was them. And I can tell you why it's important to say it was them as I go on, because it's, the events after I had the surgery that are sort of a longer story than being out of my body. So anyway, I can't move, and they sent me home to recover after about a week. And I'll never forget this. I was laying in my bed all the time because I couldn't move, and I would scream for my mother when I thought I was going to crap, which was fairly often. And some of the time she made it, and some of the time she didn't. She had this hamper of sheets, white sheets, and she had a pile of ones that I had crapped on, and she'd just take the ones that crapped and throw it in the pile, put a new one on, and geez. But I was dependent on her to move. She'd pick me up and move me around. So anyway, when you can't move, you get a desperate feeling that you want to move. So for months I was just trying to move a little bit. I could move my shoulder a little bit, and I could move my head a little bit. And as time went by, I got better at moving. So I moved over I rolled over once, and I rolled over twice, and I fell out of bed, and I was laying face down on the floor, completely exhausted and unable to move anymore. And I was happy. It was really a happy moment for me, because I hadn't made it that far before, It's just like President Roosevelt, if he would have made, 2 steps and fallen to the ground, it would have been the best day of his life. He at least moved a little bit. And that was my experience. So anyway, this isn't just a story about a near-death experience during surgery. It's also a story about lying to my uncle. And it's interesting because my mother never asked about this, but my uncle asked about this like 4 or 5 times a few years apart. So he must have sensed that I was lying to him, so he kept asking over and over again. But the surgeon had come out and talked to them after the surgery was over, and he told them that he hadn't gotten it all. What did he think he was getting? I have no idea. I'm not a medical doctor, but I have no idea what he thought he was getting. But he said he didn't get it all, and he told them that I had died for 3 minutes, and that they had resuscitated me. So my uncle knew about that. So he asked me about it. He said, you were dead for a few minutes. What was it like? Did you see that? So I told him, no, I didn't see anything at all. Nothing happened at all. And the reason why was, first, I'm 5 years old. It's a pretty heavy experience for a 5-year-old. It was a very personal thing. It was the biggest thrill I ever had. It was just an enormous thrill. And it was very personal. Your death is very, very personal. So I didn't want to talk about it. But instead of saying, I don't want to talk about it, even as a 5-year-old, I realized this. If you say, I don't want to talk about it, that's the same thing as saying yes. But if you say, no, nothing happened, then maybe you'll be left alone. But the reason I was saying, no, nothing happened, was because it was the most intense and personal experience of my life, and I didn't want to talk about it. So I just said, no, nothing happened. Which I think that when people have this experience and they tell you nothing happened, it might be that nothing happened, but it might be they just went through the most intense and personal experience of their life, and they don't want to talk about it. It could be either one of those things. So anyway, that's what he did. About every 3 or 4 years, he'd ask me again, and I would tell him, no, nothing happened. And I never did tell him this story. He died before I did, because I wouldn't tell anybody this story. I was about 45 when I started talking about it, but it was never a repressed memory. Inside my own head, I remembered every little detail. It was the sort of thing that's you remember. So anyway, for 45 years, I wouldn't talk about it, but I would think about it almost every day. And every time I thought about it, I was like start to shiver. It made me shiver for some reason, which was kind of unexplainable in a way, because it was a good experience, but still, I thought about it and I shivered, So anyway, for 45 years, I wouldn't talk about it. But when I was shivering, when I was thinking about it, I started to worry that yes, you come out of your body, but I'm not sure that once you come out that you remain alive in the next dimension for more than 10 minutes or something. That was something that worried me. But I'm pretty sure now that you go on for an extended period of time. But obviously, I haven't had enough experience to know that. But when it did happen, I did feel sort of like, my mom would be here in a minute anyway, and thinking of 80 years as a minute, that's but I don't know, I can't even say definitely. I can say you pop out and you move around, you can go through, because I had that experience, but I haven't had such enormous experience I could tell you about everything. But I think probably after you die, you continue to grow and become something else, when people talk about, becoming a star, such a beautiful star that the whole world will be in love with night and curse the Gary sun, that's what would happen with Romeo after he died. He would become such a beautiful star. But I don't know. I don't know really what happens after that. But the wildest thought is that you mature until you become an entirely new universe. That we're sort of like little seeds for gods, which I can't say. But I can say it's the wildest idea. I can't say that it's going to happen. So anyway, that's more or less the story. Now this is the thing. You see, now all my life. Well, now let me tell you first. Let me tell you about people's reaction. Since I was about 45, it became my favorite story to tell, and I tell to people that are just, like at a bus stop or something. I would tell this story. I've told it hundreds of times. It's my favorite story. And the interesting thing about that is that I have had 3 general practitioner or family doctors, and I told all 3 of them this story. The first one, Dr. Hasey, she was my primary physician for about 24 years. And she reacted with total disbelief. She said, "Oh no, I don't believe this story. It never really happened." But it really did happen. And the other 2, they believed me, but they were defensive of the surgeons. They said, "Oh, well, it really probably wasn't medical incompetence. They probably, were doing something that made some sort of sense, or my mother asked them to remove my birthmark," or they were defensive of the surgeons, and I guess that's natural for doctors, is to, defend other doctors even when they're obviously doing something incompetent. I mean, it's like trying to remove my vascular system. Even if my mother had asked them to do it, they should have, if they knew what they were doing, they would have said no. But I'll never know what they thought they were doing. I sometimes wonder if there's some sort of record from 1965, way back then. It happened at Dr. Romer's office in Green Hills, and the surgery was at Good Sam. And I don't know if there's a record of it or not, but I would like to see it if there is one. So that's it. And when I tell people this, you might ask, well, what is the reaction to this? And the reaction is usually nothing. Most people just don't have much of a reaction at all. And some people say, "Oh my God, that's a really fascinating story. Everybody in the world should know that story." And I'll also say this, that I distrust anybody telling a story about life after death, if it goes on longer than 3 minutes or so. But people do have these elaborate stories, and most of them, I think, are in a coma or something, and they're telling you about life after death from their experience of the consciousness going on when they have a coma, or they're seem like they're under the surgical anesthesia, but instead of maybe they can't move, but for some reason they have a type of body that they're still aware what's going on. They're still conscious, while the surgery is happening. And they might tell a story about life after death that goes on for an hour, but it's really about, how the drugs, the anesthesia had affected them particularly. I only believe people that more or less tell the same story I do. But anyways, as I was saying, all my life, I thought that was going to be the biggest thrill I ever had. It was an extraordinary experience. But the only thing that could possibly have beat it came along and beat it. And it's a longer story because it's a story about a relationship I had, first with the Unitarian Church, and secondly with this kid named James King, a black kid, 19-year-old black kid. I am trying to get the idea of eternal reoccurrence and beyond good and evil and perspectivism and a lot of other philosophic ideas. Most of them come from Nietzsche, but a lot of them come from me, and about half and half, about half mine and half Nietzsche. But what I think about Nietzsche is that if he were alive today, he would be thinking differently about the world than he was back in 1870 when he was so active in his work. So I feel like I'm modernizing his ideas. And the Unitarians reacted to this with intense hatred and fear. It was bizarre reaction because, I mean, why react to ideas with fear? And that just became another part of the philosophy. The philosophy is now that there's something called blind tribalism. And I say blind tribalism is the same thing as Nietzsche's will to power. Nietzsche never really worked out the ideas of the will to power, but he started to go insane before that. And he didn't really know how to grasp it, but he was looking for a single force or power in the universe in a philosophy. And what I think about Nietzsche is that he was philosophizing about physical things, physical forces, like one thing that he defines eternal reoccurrence as is a small and a great intelligence. That every person has a small intelligence that says I, but also has a great intelligence that's connected to the universe that is I, which is somewhat of the same experience as I had, in that near-death experience. And I suppose the near-death experience made me a little bit deeper thinker. But anyway, the thing about these ideas is that they're the only ideas that can work to make a modern religion. But the Unitarians are like, just full of hatred and then fear. They actually hired two policemen to guard their church in case I would come back, because they were so afraid that I was going to kill them. And just, and none of them ever come over to see me. Nobody came over. Nobody talked to me. None of them. And what I think is that they were enjoying all the good qualities in war and in, I call this blind tribalism. The good qualities would be discipline, direction, a lack of alienation, because if you have something that you love and something that you hate and you're in a group, that reduces your alienation. Whereas in life, you always feel, well, you don't know what you're doing here. God didn't give us a manual and tell us what we're doing here, and you feel alone. You might have a wife that you love and so forth, and a family, children, friends, people whether you're working with, but none of them really understand what we're doing here either, and it's just natural to feel alienated and alone. But if you have something you hate and something that you love, the room for alienation goes away. And you also get the most intense excitement that's humanly possible from war, and closer bonding. So this is, and I think it's natural. As a matter of fact, this is a part of my belief in blind tribalism, which is just an extension of Nietzsche's idea of the will to power. That you tell stories and you make up things, and I'm talking about the entire human race, that has a tendency to move towards war. And, for them, of course, the Unitarians are a real example. I think what happened between me and them are a real example, but generally, people love war. It reduces their alienation, gives them direction, gives them excitement, gives them discipline. So they tell stories and they make up things that eventually lead to war, and which, because it's a natural tendency. And so I'm trying to build this up as a workable religion, a workable philosophy. And I say that that moving along this way, towards war, to get to the good qualities like discipline, direction, a lack of alienation, is a lot like E.O. Wilson, who is a biologist, who's a professor at Harvard that studies mostly ants. And he said, look how these ants, move towards pheromones, and that it causes them to give them direction and they're working on the basis of chemicals, and they, like people, are capable of war. And I'm saying we're having a similar chemical trail, but we do it with stories, and hopefully our stories will lead to war. So we're similar to ants in that way. But anyway, this is the second story. Is a large part why I believe these things. Of course, I believe them largely because the way the Unitarians reacted. I think they reacted in a way that shows you how natural war is and how much they enjoyed it. Which, of course, they don't interpret it that way. What they tell me, and they've written me letters. None of them gave me a phone call. None of them, came over to see me. But they did write letters, and they said short business letters, and they said that they had voted 100% unanimously against everything I had to say and myself personally, and that they would arrest me if I show up at one of their churches. But anyway, telling the story that's more exciting than the death story, and the only thing that could possibly have beat it starts out with the trouble I was having with the Unitarians. They were having a problem because what they wanted to do was arrest me and have me thrown into jail forever. That was their goal, and they were having a hard time doing this. The first thing they did is they told the mobile crisis unit at UC Hospital that I was building up an arsenal of weapons or whatever, and that they knew I was going to come and kill them all. So the mobile crisis unit had to do something. So in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock at night, I'm there sleeping with my wife, and my kids are there, and my mother's there. At that time I lived with my wife and my 2 daughters and my mother, and now one of my daughters have left, and now I just live with one of my daughters, my wife. But anyway, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. It is kind of amusing, but it felt pretty awful at the time. At the time it felt pretty bad. So they come and they rip me out of my bed, and of course everybody in the house was awake by then because they just barged in. They didn't knock or anything because I guess I was so dangerous. So anyway, they took me off to UC, and I was in the hospital there for six days, and I think they came to the conclusion that there was something wrong with the people at the church because they didn't see me as being dangerous. And they searched the house, they didn't find any guns or anything because I don't own one. But even though the people at UC had come to this conclusion that there was something wrong with the church rather than something wrong with me, and they thought it was harmless. But the minister of the church, his name is Bruce, I don't know his second name, apparently kept calling the mobile crisis unit, calling them. And they came out 2 more times. But, they just knocked on the door 2 in the afternoon. They came in and they said, this guy just won't stop calling us. He's just constantly badgering us. And that's the reason I'm coming out, So that's what they said the second time. Then they came out a third time, and they said the same thing, and they apologized. And, I was eating lunch at the time, I said, you want to sit down? And, we're having chili and something. And they said, no, we don't want to eat. But they said, this is the last time we're coming out here. We don't care how many times he calls. We're just going to tell him to stop calling, and this is it. So, and to them, that was a horrible situation because they knew that I was going to kill them all. And they wanted me in jail for the rest of my life. But they only got me for 6 days, and they didn't seem to be able to find a way to get me after that. But this is an interesting thing, too. And to some extent, I don't understand this because the Springdale police, because they're in Springdale Township, kept coming out to see me. They must have come out like 10 times, and every time they came out, they would just leave me alone because I wasn't doing anything that was illegal, which, I'm sure frustrated them horribly. because I wasn't getting arrested. They wanted me in jail for the rest of my life, and they couldn't find a way to get me arrested. I wasn't doing anything illegal, but I was sending out ideas. That come from Nietzsche and myself. And I had a phone book for the church with all the people's names in it. I kept sending these things out because I was trying to aggravate the system. Right from the very beginning, I was trying to aggravate the system. I was actually, trying to start a war, so I could create some sort of contrast or some sort of conflict that would, at least get their attention. Because, well, I'll tell you this story. It was a close friend of mine named Dick Ryman. He was my uncle's best friend for the 30s, 1930s. They were Boy Scouts together, and both of them had fathers that committed suicide, and they were friends and lifelong. And I met him when I was 4 years old. I was born in Florida, and I lived there. And then before I moved here to Cincinnati, and I knew him all my life. And he was a historian at St. John's Unitarian Church because his parents had been historians. I'm not historians, but a member of the church since it was downtown on 12th and Elm Street, which was like 1880. And he had been a Unitarian, his parents and himself, all his life. He lived to be a very old man. And that's the reason he was a historian at St. John's, and he was a student of Unitarianism too. But the thing is, he went to church every week. They said that he came in with the first load of bricks, and I guess the building they're in now was built in the early 50s, and he had been going there, when it was, I think they had 3 different buildings. There was one downtown in 12th and Elm, and then there was another one, and then there's the one they were at now. But the people there said that he came in with the first load of bricks because he was there every week, But the thing about that is he also never had anything good to say about the Unitarians. He was loyal to them, but he had absolute contempt for them. He thought that they were just like, almost worthless people. So it's hard to explain what he was doing, but people are hard to explain generally, and that was the situation with Dick. So anyway, Debbie was there, which is unusual because Debbie hates the Unitarians, and I hate them as a philosopher, as a thinker, but she just hates them the way normal people hate them because they're generally fairly unpopular. And she also is a fundamentalist, which bothers me, but after 30 years I've gotten used to it. But anyway, so she just hates them as the normal way that most people hate them. They're snotty, they're elitist, they're fake, they're uncaring, those sort of things. That's the reason she gets for hating them. But for me, it's more like, they need to change. They need to become a real religion. They need a deeper philosophy. So anyway, it's unusual, but Debbie was there, and they were having lunch, and I was having lunch with Dick, and he wanted to explain the situation to me. He said, what you're doing is impossible. There's these people, they're very superficial, and they don't want any ideas, and they can't comprehend them, and you cannot give them any substance, and they're going to reject it if you try. And then he gave a line that I think it's the world's greatest line concerning this conflict. He said, you're banging your head against a brick wall. What the Unitarians are is a brick wall, and you're banging your head against this brick wall, and they're not even noticing that you're there. They don't even know that you're there. They don't care about what you have to say, and they aren't noticing anything that you have to say. And they have no idea what you're talking about. They don't care. What they care about, this is the line, what they care about is what they're doing next Tuesday. And, maybe they should be superficial. But that's sort of the way it is. So when I got thrown out and I started a war, which I was trying to do, I used to, this is a way of starting it. I had written an essay, and I put pictures, not, little pornographic pictures in there, because I thought that they would react against that, and that it would give me more of a chance to be seen. After what Dick told me, I wanted to aggravate them, because I felt like it would be better to aggravate them than the impossibility of trying to give them any ideas. And what they really run on, they don't have a set of principles, but what they really run on is love is the answer, which is like the road to hell. When you think of love is the answer, the next thing that happens is tyranny and violence and horrible things. It's just very unrealistic. What's realistic is nature itself. We're not that much different than the other animals. If you want to think that what's going to happen or how people are going to react, the best way to guess it is to look at the other animals and how would they react. And nature is beyond good and evil. And the second thing is blind obedience to authority. And I used to go to St. John's or to Northern Hills. It was my home church, and for a long time it was a fellowship, which meant that they didn't have a minister. Other Unitarian ministers would come in and give a sermon, or speakers from the outside world would come in and give a sermon or a lecture of some sort, and they didn't have a minister, but they wanted to hire one. And you should have seen how fanatical they were. I mean, it was like they needed this authority so badly. It was like a tiger going after red meat. They needed to have this. And they also needed to have 100% agreement on this minister. They said if like 3 people, there's probably about 100 people in the church. It was a small church. But they said if 3 people would vote against him, that he wouldn't take the job. So there needed to be 100% agreement. And I mean, they went at this in a fanatical way, which I heard that they went into a horrible hysteria against me and these ideas, which I thought that was a step up. But I feel like I was there when they were experiencing this hysteria, because I was there when they hired Gary, their first minister, and man, that was a lesson to me. I started to think that a minister would be all right if he got 60% of the vote, like a presidential election or something. I had no idea that it had to be almost complete agreement before that they would consider that they were accepted. But that's what the Unitarians run on. They run on love is the answer and blind obedience, and a need to be in 100% agreement. That's the reason they're 100% in disagreement with me and my modernization of Nietzsche. But the problem with that is these are the only ideas that they can use to build an actual modern religion on. So they're stuck in a situation where either they do this because these are the only ideas that are going to work, or they stay the way they are now, which is basically love is the answer and blind obedience, which is the same thing pretty much as saying that they aren't anything, which is what Dick said, that you could have deep ideas, but they're a brick wall and they're not going to even notice you're there, and what they care about is what they're doing next Tuesday. So, but what I think is that it's fine for them to be superficial in their churches, and love is the answer, and blind obedience to authority is what's natural, and that's even after, if they were to change their principles to the deeper set of principles, that's probably what would still continue to be driving them. But that they should have a deeper philosophy underneath that, just to have some sort of substance. And also, I wanted to write, and I still want to write, and I about a quarter way through a new Bible called Zoroaster, which is based on a set of principles. I have it boiled down to one page, but I don't have it here. That wasn't the story that I was going to tell, but I have it boiled down to one page. And but I'm just going to take that philosophy on the one page and make it work with this new Bible called Zoroaster's. And what I thought was Nietzsche got about halfway there, and I could take what he did and carry it in for the other half for a touchdown. Now, he was on the 50-yard line. I can carry it in for a touchdown. He wrote Zarathustra. That was his great masterpiece, and yeah, that's what he had. He had the intention of writing a new Bible himself, and that's to a large extent what Zoroaster is. And it's written in surahs, just like the Quran. So and that's another thing I want to do with this is I want to take this new Bible, and I want it to shift from fighting the war on terror with bullets. That somehow we think we're going to defeat Unitarianism with bullets. I mean, defeat Islam with bullets, which is not going to happen. But if you write Zoroaster as a new Bible, and it is in surahs because Nietzsche wrote in surahs, and say this is an improvement on the Quran, or this is better than the Quran, you shift the war from being about bullets to being about ideas, which is one of the things I say to the Unitarians is that this isn't superficial. This is about world peace, and it's about shifting the fight of Islam from bullets to ideas. And the thing is, you see, we think that we're somehow so superior, that we have these Republican beliefs, and which are superior. Republicanism is about one man, one vote, free speech, free religion, pursuit of happiness, and capitalism. And most of all, Republicanism is about the individual. The individual has these rights like free speech or freedom of association, and no vote can take it away. Republicanism is about not allowing the tyranny of the masses. It's not democratic in the whole way, because if everybody except one person was against something, that one person was thinking for themselves, he's got a right to not be forced by this mass of people, how should I say, the tyranny of the majority. Republicanism is beyond the tyranny of the majority, and that's what we're fighting for, and it is superior to fighting for Islam, which is basically a person named Muhammad who wrote this book, but he was just like this vicious criminal. I mean, I read the Quran cover to cover, and it's like, oh my God, how could anybody follow this religion? It's just, so vicious. It was just like, chop off the heads of the infidels, and if somebody is causing mischief upon the land, which was mischief upon the land, was not believing in him. See, that's the thing. The famous quote of Islam that George Bush and President Obama always quoted, which was first, it's the fifth surah. First, Muhammad is telling the story of Cain and Abel, and then I think it's like line 34, which I guess every line's a chapter, and the entire chapter, then every line's a verse, just like in the Bible, and then every surah is a surah. But anyway, I think it was 34. It said, after talking about Cain and Abel, it said, to kill one person is as if to kill the whole world, and to save one life is as if to save the whole world. But that's the way George Bush and Obama quote it, but that isn't exactly the quote. It says, to kill one person is like to kill the whole world, which is there. Then you see, this is the part they leave out. Except for mischief upon the land and murder. If you have those two things, then there's an exception to killing somebody as being a bad thing. And then if you save one life, after that exception, then if you save one life, It's as if saving the whole world. And they leave out that part. They leave out the part where there's an exception. And the very next line says, the punishment for mischief upon the land, which basically is disagreeing with Muhammad. If you're saying bad things about Islam or you're just a non-believer, you're causing mischief upon the land. And he says, the punishment, this is the very next line, the punishment for mischief upon the land is to cut off one hand and one foot from the opposite direction, banishment from the land, which means leaving them out in the desert to die, or crucifixion, or there was something else. But you get the idea, I mean, it's like this extraordinarily violent thing, and here we have two presidents. They're quoting it in a way that is really misrepresenting it to make it seem peaceful, but you read it. Of course, I'm not a believer, and he was constantly saying that anybody that disbelieves is going to fry forever in hell for not believing in him. And so, and it was just constant. I mean, every surah had that in it, except for tired women and disbelievers. Those were the two most moderate sort of two surahs. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent, but it's not a total tangent, because if we were to write this new Zoroaster and say, look, this is a better written book than the Quran, because it is. It's much more poetic, and the writing's much greater, which Nietzsche's Zoroaster is right now, and it has a better moral lesson. So if we were to say those things, we would shift the war from being bullets to being ideas. So it's not a superficial thing, So I'm saying to the Unitarians that they should do this because it would shift the war, and and it might stop a lot of killing, and it seems like a really good reason, but it's just I get hatred, I get this fear, and the reason why is good qualities in war, and that's the same thing that the war on terror is about. See, we're getting the same thing that the Muslims are getting, and it's not just us, and it's not just them, it's also the Nazis or the communists or any war that practically has ever happened. People that are supposedly experts give you economic or political explanations of war. No. Underneath them, they are all blind tribalism. They have a very, very similar motivation, and just like the motivation I have in my war against the Unitarians, my personal little war. So it's really about all the good qualities in war, and the good qualities in war pretty much outweigh the bad ones. I mean, discipline, direction, lack of alienation, and those are a lot of good qualities. And the bad qualities are just a preference for ignorance. You resist evidence. You would rather be ignorant, which is what the Unitarians are, sort of in my war of the essays. And the second bad quality is a support of a single individual. You have a single individual, and you have a leader that's going to be able to direct the war. So it's blind obedience to, a single individual, and that leads to grotesque injustice. So the bad qualities in war are grotesque injustice and a preference for ignorance, and that's what we have going on here concerning our love of war. We're not thinking of it. What's underneath it. It isn't Nietzsche's will to power and blind tribalism, and this should be a medical discussion, a biological discussion like E.O. Wilson. It's we're so great, we're so superior, our soldiers are so wonderful, which basically is getting the good qualities. They're going after the good qualities and blind tribalism. And all these things relate to the good qualities. They're getting excitement, they're getting a sense of superiority, they're getting direction and discipline. That's what we're getting. And on the other side, on the Islamic side, they're getting the exact same thing. So to a certain extent, we're fighting about the same thing. And you can't really expect this war to ever end. I mean, as long as both sides are getting the same good emotional things, it's going to continue. But if you define, the will to power and blind tribalism, and you try to make this a medical and biological thing, and you create a different book, and say, well, look, this is more moral and it's more beautifully written, then you might start to win. And to a large extent, it's common sense, but nobody seems to realize that. So this is what I want to do with my life. I want to create that book, and I want to change the focus of the war, shift it from bullets to ideas. So anyway, that's the reason I ended up in the hospital for the criminally insane. I had started this war with the Unitarians, and they were very frustrated about the police. If we didn't have the police, people would be doing things like murder and all sorts of things because they felt they can get away with it. So, but the law is there. People are afraid of it enough that it protects you in that way. But anyway, so they had this frustration. So, and what I was talking about with the intellectuals is that there's lawyers in their audience, and this was all the Unitarian churches here in Cincinnati. So I think it's fair to say that they had a gang of lawyers, 10, 15, 20 lawyers, maybe more, working on this from a legal standpoint, and they're frustrated they can't find a way to get me arrested, even though they have that many lawyers. So I guess the lawyers told the minister, Bruce, that he could get me, but he had to get me to call him. So he wrote me an email, and he said he wanted me to call him in the email. So I called him, and I wanted to meet with him about these ideas because, I like talking about Nietzsche. I like talking about, eternal reoccurrence and beyond good and evil and perspectivism and, the liberation principles, all the things that, that are part of this structure. And I wanted to talk to this guy generally. So I called him up and I said, well, maybe, we should get together. What about tomorrow? No, I'm busy tomorrow. I've got this and that to do. What about the next day? No. What about Saturday? Oh, I'm going away for the weekend, but call me again on Monday. Okay? So that was the conversation after he sent me the email. So Monday comes along, and I call him up again, and he's just gloating. I mean, just absolutely gloating. He said, now I've got you. I've got you for telephone harassment, and I'll never meet with you. And everything you have to say is so insane that nobody could possibly comprehend it, which seemed to be the general consensus among the Unitarians. Okay, I mean, a third of them have PhDs, and more or less is improving the ideas of Nietzsche, which is taught in all sorts of philosophy classes, and it's generally considered the deepest thought in the Western tradition. But according to this group, a third of them are PhDs. It's so insane and so incoherent that nobody can understand it. And that's what he says to me. He says exactly like that. And he says, now I've got you for telephone harassment, and I'm going to get you thrown in jail. So that's what he does. He files, the necessary paper, goes down and swears to the clerk of courts that what he's saying is absolutely true. And anyway, then I could tell the story, the legal story, which is a pretty fascinating story, but telling it I could go on for hours. But anyway, he was successful at getting me prosecuted, which is fascinating because A poor person, what happens is they get 2 minutes in front of the judge, and they don't really get to defend themselves. It's not like being a rich person. A rich person comes in with 4 or 5 lawyers, and they make all sorts of arguments. They could tie the court up for months for the same thing that a poor person does, and he only gets 2 minutes. And I was a poor person. But the thing was, and this has to be kind of aggravating for them too, they got me for such a petty little crime, which is a petty little teeny tiny crime, which they set me up for in the beginning, which never came out in court. I got 2 minutes. But it was such a small crime, it only had 60 days. It was sort of like getting thrown in at UC. I only had 6 days, so it's like they got me, but 60 days. I'll be out again. I'll be causing as much trouble in 60 days as I was before then. But that turned out not to be true. I've been working on the project, but I haven't been bothering them that much. I feel like I'm neglecting the war, that I should be harassing and bothering them more. But anyway, they did get me. So the story that's more exciting than the story of death, or the most intense thing that ever happened to me inside the hospital for the criminally insane for those 60 days. You see, it started out this way. I didn't know how I ended up getting there. I didn't feel like I was doing anything wrong. And I was mad, I was really mad. I said, I'm not doing anything wrong. I really shouldn't be here. And I probably wouldn't have been there if I would have been rich. I would have had a much better, criminal defense. But it's probably a good thing that I didn't have that. I got to say this. They gave me a public defender, and he was this black holy roller, and he hated the fact that I was fighting a church. And I had a meeting with him, and I said, oh God, this meeting was just absolutely horrible. I mean, just terrible. This guy wants to prosecute me more than he wants to defend me, which I was sure of. I mean, it was just obvious to me. But I didn't go to his boss, so I can't really say anything against the public defenders. I mean, mine was the black holy roller, and he hated me and he wanted to prosecute me. But it was my fault for not going to his boss and saying that, because I knew it was true right after our first meeting, and so I didn't try to get a different public defender. If I would have done that, and I would have been told, no, you only have one, or something, they gave me a runaround, or then I could say something bad about the public defenders. But I didn't go to his boss, and if I did, I said, this person cannot represent me. He wants to prosecute me. And the interesting thing about that would be, they said, no, this is the one you're stuck with. Then I'd have a choice, because I am by nature not a lawyer. I don't want to deal with anything related to the law. But my choice would have been, if I would have realized this is the only one that I've got, I could either have a lawyer that hates me and wants to prosecute me, and is going to do whatever he can to convict me, even though he's my lawyer, or I could do it myself, even though I'm not naturally inclined towards this sort of work. But either, it's a kind of a bad decision either way. But I was so disconcerted, I didn't tell his boss and say, I know this is true, and I did. I knew weeks and weeks before the trial that this was true, which just shows you how bad a lawyer I would be. I don't even defend myself, I was so uninvolved, I didn't even go to his boss to say this. And, somebody that won't defend themselves, obviously, he's not going to defend other people. So I'm just better off not having that job. But anyway, so I end up in the hospital for 60 days, right? Big deal. But I get there and, oh my God, how did I end up here at all? Because my ideas don't seem insane to me. They're hiring policemen to protect them, and they're in this hysteria, and supposedly I'm the one that's sort of causing this hysteria. But anyway, and I guess they would say that's the reason I was there. But I don't know. Obviously, I was there for blind obedience. That I wasn't being blindly obedient to their authority. And I was there for all the good qualities in war and for the disease of blind tribalism. That's what I was there for. But I felt like, I didn't know when I was there. I shouldn't be there, and I was upset about it. So what I did is I just shut my door and didn't come out of the room for 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, I had this like religious conversion. But it wasn't like to Christ. It was a conversion to believing in each individual had God in them. Sort of like Nietzsche said, the great intelligence. They're not really, ill. The people in the hospital, they're scratched up in the surface of their soul. They've got little illnesses on the surface of their soul, which is scratched up. But if you go in towards the interior, which is God, they're perfectly healthy. So I started seeing all these people as being like little perfect gods, So I came out of, after 2 weeks of, sort of sulking and how did I get here and that kind of crap. I take out of my room, get out of my room, this religious conversion, and I'm seeing these people as little gods. And this is the way it is, Now, I'm free as a bird, and just hanging around with my family and living a normal life, and I see people as pieces of crap, little aggravating little pieces of shit, which is normal, But then I wasn't seeing that at all, and I say that of my time there, that it was my most spiritual, religious time. It was maybe the best experience of my life. And I also say this about it. When you're locked up in the hospital for the criminally insane, let me see, I forgot I remember. I remember what I was going to say. When you're locked up in the hospital for the criminally insane, you learn more about human nature in 60 days in there than you would learn in years outside. You really see a lot about human nature. Even now, I remember it was maybe the best time of my life. So I was sort of thankful that the Unitarians got me thrown in there. It changed my perspective on everything. So anyway, I come out. It's 2 weeks. I come out. I have this religious conversion. I'm seeing all these people as little gods, and the first person I started getting involved with is James. And the thing about James is he seems out of place. Most of the other people seem crazy, but James just seems very normal, and he seems out of place. And he ends up being the one I spend most of my time with. So it's sort of like I gravitated towards someone that wasn't crazy. So even though I was seeing them as little gods, I still gravitated towards the most normal person in there. James, he was a poor black kid from over the Rhine. And this is the thing, this is a story about being locked up. Because what happened was, me and James, we started getting closer and closer. We were like brothers, and we were like, the most important people to each other. And he was, a poor black kid from over the Rhine. I'd probably say hello to him on the street, but I wouldn't have anything to do with him. But when you're locked up, you're restricted. You only have the people that you're with that are also locked up. And for that reason, we became very, very important to each other. Anyway, what we're doing with our time is we're playing chess, and we're playing dominoes and cards, and mostly chess. And he's winning like 4 games out of 5, and he's getting real cocky about this. How boys are about games. It means a lot to them. And chess is a game. It uses a lot of your mental energy. So you have to think all the time. And, you know, I was winning 20% of the time. And he knew that if he made any mistakes that I would get him. So, you know, I mean, he had to be careful. But he was getting really, really, really full of himself over this. And the other games, like spades, he would win more often than not because he was just a good player. But the other thing that was happening, and this was happening 3 times a day, and I have a little drawing that I did for this. Yeah. As I get to talk about James, you're going to see what the only, and I say it's the only thing that could have possibly beat the life after death experiences. Only one possibility, and it happened with him. But anyway, we were boxing 3 times a day, and the thing is, you know, like vastly superior to me physically. So there was never like any hope that I could possibly win. And it was also the thing that I wouldn't have done, not even one time. I wouldn't have done it one time, but every day it was 3 times a day. And I lost 60 pounds in 40 days. 60 days. No, I lost 40 pounds in 60 days. That's what I was trying to say. And it was largely because of James. Boy, I'll tell you what. He was aerobic exercise if there ever was an aerobic exercise. It was like an enormous amount of energy just coming at you. And it helped me to lose a lot of weight. And the guys were teasing me because when I came in, I looked like this, you know, nice and fat. And later, when I went out, my stomach was flat because I had lost so much weight. They put me on a good diet, so it was sort of a combination of being on a good diet where and all the exercise I was getting from James. But anyway, you know, so I'm in there, and I have a lot of time. So me and Dwight, who was my partner in this, we're walking, more or less mall walking. You know, and we were going like this. We were walking like that. And I was walking probably about an hour and a half a day. So that would be about 3 hours. I mean, about 3 miles in the circle a day. Me and Dwight would just keep going around this circle. And James had his place right here. That was his corner. And he would go there, and sometimes he would take naps. He'd move a chair over there, take naps. But he was a rapper. He really loved rap music. And him and some of the other guys in the pod would be in that corner rapping. And that was sort of his place. So I was walking around in the circle, and he would be there in the corner, and he would start boxing matches. And you should have seen Dwight every time that James would do this, and he was doing it 3 times a day. Dwight would just get this look of horror almost. You know, he hated this, and I did too. It was like nerve-wracking to me. It was like one notch below getting the shakes and diarrhea, it was uncomfortable for me. But I didn't want to start, you know, walking like this instead of going all the way around, because I didn't want James to beat me in a way, or get me to change just because he was there. And there's also the question of the staff. You know, why didn't they do anything about this? To stop this, because I was getting beat on probably more than anybody in the history of of anybody ever at Summit, because it was James. You know, it's going. Yeah, but you see, it's at Summit. It's a long-term thing. There's people in there that's 14, 15, 16, 20 years, and what they do is they watch the people and they get to know them, but they don't try to change them. And I thought that, which makes a lot of sense. They've learned somewhere down the line that they can't change them, so they just don't try. And I think that they saw me and James as a kind of couple, you know, that we were, you know, a kind of couple. We were together a lot, and they didn't want to get in between us. And also they have these therapeutic program team meetings, which are a lot like interrogation sessions. And I would say, you know, me and James, we might have something weird going on together, but I don't want you to get in between it. So that was probably the reason that they didn't do anything about the fact that I was getting beat on 3 times a day. But anyway, yeah, James loved it. Yeah, which is obvious because he wouldn't be doing it if he didn't. I mean, it's happening 3 times a day. You know, new lovers don't have sex that often. It was, yeah. But anyway, so I was walking around with Dwight about 3 miles, 2 to 3 miles a day, going like this. And during that time, James would come over here, and I guess you could say he's picking on me, but he started, you know, these little boxing matches, and he had some rules. The first rule was he wasn't going to hit me, and he never made a fist, not even one time. He'd have an open hand, and what he would do is he would graze me a little bit. Most of the time he'd miss, but every once in a while he'd sort of graze me. And when he's doing that, the reaction was pretty much like it was a real fight. You know, he might as well have been hitting me rather than grazing me. And I reacted, you know, in a way that I tried to defend myself. And he had different levels. That was another rule of his, that he was going to be unpredictable, or you know, I never knew what he was going to do. The first level was he would just sort of like slap me around for a few seconds. It could be as short as 60 seconds or even 30 seconds, and then just sort of like move around. He's just doing that. Then the next level was that he would dance around slow enough that I could hit him. And I could do that for 10, 20 minutes. And sometimes, it wasn't unusual to go that long. And when I was done after that time, I would still have enough energy. I wouldn't really be tired. It was a lot of exercise, but it didn't make me tired. And the reason I'm saying that is because the next stage is when he would speed up. He would speed up, and then I couldn't hit him because he was moving too fast. And after about 6 minutes of that, you know, give or take a minute either direction, I would get tired. You know, it's something. And this is I hadn't ever had that feeling before I met James, but after I met him, and during the days that I was with him, you know, I'd say he did it about 5, maybe 6 times a week, and this is the way it felt. It's like here's the normal amount of energy that you have for the day, and when you start trying to hit somebody and you can't do it because they're moving too quick, and you're really trying to do it. I mean, you're trying to do it. It feels like this. And in 6 minutes, it feels like all the energy you have in your body, just for that day, just like drains out very quickly. It's like a needle going down very fast, and you feel like you know, you're totally exhausted at the end of it, and like you're not going to have any energy for the rest of the day. But that's untrue. And when that happened, what I'd do is I'd lay down for about an hour and a half. And after an hour and a half, the energy would come back. But at the end of the 6 minutes, you feel like your energy is not going to come back, but it does. But you do have to lay down for about an hour and a half afterwards. Well, of course, I was wondering this. I was wondering if 6 minutes of that kind of exercise was worth an hour or two of normal exercise, and it might have been. So that was one level. And after 6 minutes, what I'd do is I'd sort of like stoop like this, and I'd slow down because I was tired, you know. And he'd almost always just let me go when that happened. But every once in a while, and this is the part that I say is the strangest part. And this only happened 6 times. I remember that it only happened 6 times because it was such a I don't know if it was the word strange experience. Strange isn't quite the right word. because what it was he was trying to show me, and which is something that I had no doubt to begin with. But what he was trying to show me that if he wanted to, he could be mean to me. He was like letting the darker side of his personality come out and showing that if he wanted to, he could hurt me, or he could, he just wanted me to feel the darker side of who he was. And when he started to do this, I certainly felt that. Normally when we were boxing, it had a kind of friendly feeling to it. It was nerve-wracking to me, but it wasn't a mean sort of feeling. But when he started doing this, the feelings started going darker and sort of. But anyway, so like after 6 minutes, I'm leaning over here, and so I'm sort of like slowing down because, I'm running out of energy. I'm slowing down, and when you reach that, that's a point of being tired. But there's 2 points. There's the point of being tired, and then there's a point of being exhausted. When you reach the state of exhaustion, you have to lay down because you don't have any energy left. So you're at a time you just, if you go on long enough and you reach that state, you'll end up being so tired you can't get up off the ground. So basically, he usually let me go when I got tired, but 6 times he tried to push me to exhaustion. And he gave up every time. He gave up after 8 minutes of this, but he never, took it to the point that I was totally exhausted. But when he started to do that, and like I said, it started to have this real dark sort of, I could be mean to you or I could hurt you if I wanted to, sort of a feeling about it. And I'd be doing it, and I'd be my brain would start yelling at me. My brain would start yelling, stop, just lay down, go away, just stop, move, leave. And it was yelling at me that. And usually when my brain yells at me, I do what it says, but there's something about this, and I think this is the reason people that are in wars, even when they know they're going to lose the war, they keep doing it, because there was something about that. It was just really hard to give up, even though I knew I was just being made a fool of, and that and there was no chance that I would win. And even with my brain yelling at me, I would still keep on fighting. There's just something about it. It was just very hard to give up once you were in the middle of it. But anyway, that would happen. He didn't totally push me to exhaustion, and it was the strangest part of this experience. Anyway, so every day I'm going around this circle with Dwight about 2 to 3 miles a day, and James is there, and we're boxing 3 times a day. And boy, I'll tell you what. I mean, when I say he was a bundle of energy, I mean, my God. So anyway, this is going on, and we're playing cards together, and we're spending a lot of time together. And now I've got to talk about Nate and Chris, because they're the other part of this thing that happened between us, which, like I said, it was the only thing that could have beat the life after death or near-death experience that I had. And Nate and Chris were a big part of this. Almost as big part as me and James together. But anyway, I have a chapter in White Daddy and his war about the walk. I call it the walk, saying that there's a lot of lunatics in a small place. So me and Dwight were walking in this direction like this, and James and Nate, who were this Chris, I always felt about him that he was gay, and he was having a harder time coming out than any other person I ever met. And he was tortured by this. Tortured. He couldn't admit that he was gay, and he was tortured by this. But him and Nate, they wanted to be lovers. They were very alike, and it was just natural for them to want to be lovers. But of course, they couldn't be because the rules of the hospital wouldn't let them. But they were walking in the opposite. They were doing the same thing. They were I call it mall walking, which it really kind of was. I mean, it's a pretty big area. It was a nice building, but they were walking in the opposite direction. And we're going around, and I say that wasn't only an extremely violent sort of charged atmosphere, because James, had that quality, being of the boxing. It was like enjoyment of violence, and he loved to do it. So he gave it a violent characteristic, and James and Nate, they gave it a sexual characteristic, because they'd be walking by, and Chris was in the sweatpants that the hospital gives you. He didn't have street clothes for a long time, and he would have an erection, and he would go around like this with an erect penis with Nate, and he'd walk holding on to it. That's the story. This was really happening, and I was trying to help Chris and Nate, be a couple, and for Chris to be less ashamed to be engaged, to be more proud of it, and to accept it, and to come out and to be less crazy. That was sort of a thing that I was doing all the time for Chris, and I didn't have to do it so much for Nate, because Nate sort of accepted his sexuality, and he really wanted Chris, and sometimes he would, it got pretty close to them, making out and stuff like that, and when it got so close that they were almost kissing or something, instead of kissing Nate, Chris would yell, "The force is against you." He had a thing with Star Wars. But anyway, I had a relationship with Nate and Chris, and with James, and it was, like I said, very violent and sexually charged walk in a small space. But anyway, now this is it. This is the story about the only thing that could have beat the life after death thing. So I'll go ahead and I'll tell the this was a Friday night. Then on Fridays and Saturdays they let you stay up to 12:30, but every other night they make you go to bed at 10. And this was a Friday night, and me and James, we always watched the Adult Swim, which is the Family Guy, King of the Hill, the Boondocks, the adult type cartoons. They were on to like 12:30. We'd watch them from like 11 to 12:30. It was an hour and a half of these adult cartoons, and it was a special night because we both liked the cartoons. So anyway, we're getting, it could be a normal Friday. We're going to watch the cartoons, but that's not the way that turned out. So it's about 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock on a Friday, and me and James are together. I'm James. Let's say James is the X, and I'm the O. It's pretty close to there. I'm the O. It was very close to Chris's room. Chris's room was right here, and then we're just standing, sort of like I'm doing now, just leaning against the wall, talking like normal. And Nate and Chris, they're mall walking. It's 10 o'clock at night, but they're mall walking. They're going this direction. They're going the direction that me and Dwight usually followed. And I'm looking at them, and it starts to be right here, and I'm looking at them, and they're coming closer and closer, and it's a little creepy looking at them coming closer to me. So anyway, they keep going, and then they turn the corner, and they come straight at me, and there started to be like this electric feeling. There was just like this electric feeling in the place, you know, just this tremendous electric feeling. And the walls started to get like this, just like in the movies. The walls started to get like this. And you know, I started to cringe. I was like this, I was cringing. And I guess that's when James must have grabbed me. And the interesting thing about this story is the things I didn't feel, as well as the things I did. I didn't feel him grab me. And maybe one of the reasons was I was cringing. I was compressing myself. At the same time, he started to compress me. So he grabbed me. And another reason maybe I didn't feel that was because it was so quick. It was like turning on a light quick, where Nate and Chris were on me and they were beating on me. And James was just like constricting me. And I couldn't move. I was like up against it. And he had my hands against him and his arms here. And for the first 2 minutes, I was trying to fight to get free. And I couldn't move. I mean, every time I tried to move, he just tightened up more, and I wasn't able to move. If you've been standing there watching this, it would look like I wasn't moving. So I was fighting for a couple minutes, and then I decided, I said to myself, stop fighting and just enjoy this. This is something really unusual, and just enjoy it. And I gotta say what it felt like. Even from the first second that this started, it had this real religious feeling. It felt like the most solemn and deeply religious thing that I had ever experienced. That was the feeling from the beginning. And also this was quiet. There was practically no noise involved in this at all. It had this very quiet, sort of solemn religious feeling. It was very, very deep. But anyway, after 2 minutes, I decided I'm going to stop fighting and just enjoy this. So I did that. And of course, I was tightly up against him anyway, because he was pulling me so tight I couldn't move. And then it became, oh my God, I'm standing inside of James. And it was just an unbelievable feeling. You know, I mean, his heart was beating like 1,000,000 miles a minute, and his muscles are extremely tight, and you know, and I was standing inside of him, and I was feeling this, but there was something beyond that. It was like standing inside of God or something. I mean, it was like walking in the water. It was just like an unreal, sort of unbelievable, sort of like rapture and paradise in there. I mean, it was just like this, ooh, it was, oh, wow, you know, just wow. So anyway, I'm having this experience, and Chris and Nate, they're punching me, you know, while James is restricting me, but they're not really punching me, and they're just tapping me, which is the same way it was with James when he was dancing around slow enough that I could hit him. I never hit him. I mean, I was hitting him, but I was tapping him because I didn't want to hurt him. The same way he was just grazing me with an open hand. I felt the same way, and so I was tapping him, but I was hitting him, you know. But I was doing it. I was tapping him. The only time I tried to hit him was those 6 times when it, you know, turned dark, where he was trying to show me he could hurt me. When I thought he was being dark like that it was all right for me to hit him as hard as I could. But most of the time, you know, I couldn't hit him because he was moving too fast. And of those 6 times, I think I'd connected twice. And I was probably moving at about, I don't know, 10, 15 miles an hour. And then I'm 210 pounds now, but then I was 160 pounds. So it's about 160 pounds going at 10 miles an hour, which is, so I hit him. And the 2 times I hit him, he said, "You got me, George." So it might have been enough to leave a small bruise or a little sore. But he was very muscular, but probably didn't do anything to hurt him at all. But he did say, "I got you." But generally, I was just tapping him. And that was what Nate and Chris, they were doing. They're just tapping me. And they didn't hit below the belt. They were hitting my face and my chest and my stomach, and they couldn't hit me on the sides because James had me so constricted like that, and I couldn't, and his arms were there, and wow. So anyway, when I stopped fighting, I went into the state of rapture. It was, like indescribable. It was just indescribable, and it was so wonderful. It was the deepest experience I ever had. And so, sometimes some people might be able to relate to this. And every once in a while, when me and my wife were having sex, her brain just goes in the right place. This happens about 4 or 5 times a year. But yeah, I always feel like I'm a real consistent as a lover. I more or less give the same performance every time, but she's different. Sometimes we're having sex, she'll have 100 orgasms. Sometimes she'll have 10. Sometimes she'll have 5. Sometimes she won't have any at all. And she goes like this, she's all over the place, but I'm like this. I'm pretty much giving the same performance. And what I learned from that is that you can't really give a woman an orgasm. Either her brain is at the right place to get one, or it's not. And that's the reason she varies so much, and has none, has a lot, has none, has a lot. But every once in a while, she would get in the state, and every time I push in, she's getting an orgasm. She's getting really wild and excited about this. And at the end of this, when this happens, and it feels like she's pulling it out of you. She's pulling the cum out of you, because when she's having that many orgasms, it's hard not to have one yourself. And her instructions to me was, when that starts to happen, just keep going until the point that she passes out. That's what she said. If I could go for hours in that state, she would appreciate it if I could do that. About half the time she gets in that state, I go for an extra half an hour, and sometimes I come in like 2 or 3 minutes, which is any time I would disappoint her, because it's hard not to, when she's getting that excited. But when I finally do come, it's like we're having the same experience at the same time, and it's like we're welded together, having the same experience. And I asked her about it, and she says that that's exactly the way she feels too. And it's sort of like that. There might have been a lot of people that have had that experience, sexually. And what was happening when I sat inside James, I said it was sort of like that, but it was more intense, and it went on for 10 minutes. And it was just, like I said, it's the only thing that could have beat that near death experience, and it did. It was just like unbelievable. So anyway, I'm there. I'm sitting inside James, and Chris and Nate, they're punching me, and it feels like I'm going up their arms. My soul's going up in their arms, and I'm feeling their heartbeat, and I'm feeling them breathing. I'm feeling like I'm inside their body. At the same time, I'm in James. And then it felt like the four of us just melted together and became one person. And it just, it's so intense and so unusual, I would say, that it's, you can't explain it with words. But I'm doing the best that I can. But anyway, it's about 12 minutes into this, and James gets tired, which he had to do. He couldn't stay at that state of tension forever. So he relaxes. And when he relaxes, it felt like the earth changing. And I was in there, and I was in a state of rapture. But at that point, all 4 of us had lost voluntary control of our bodies. We were all in the state of adrenaline that was making us do things involuntarily. It was what was running the show. It wasn't, I couldn't control my body at that time because the adrenaline was doing what it wanted, and it was a higher level of my own consciousness at that time. So it was doing for me instead of me having, an ability to make a decision. So when he relaxed, it felt like the strongest earthquake that ever happened in the world. And I was very surprised about this. And my soul went flying out at about 1,000,000 miles an hour, which was a surprise to me because I was so enraptured. But I didn't really have the choice to stay inside him, no matter how enraptured I was, because the adrenaline. And the adrenaline made boom, very forcefully pushed my soul back into myself. I could feel it snapping. And like I said, that what I didn't feel is as interesting as what I did feel. Because, see, what I felt, and I guess it was my soul, it shot out of him like this, and then snapped back in me, and that's what I felt. It was very, like I said, like the world's strongest earthquake ever. It had this like real intense feeling. Bang! And then it went back into my cell, and it was like, you don't really know you have a soul until it moves. When it moves, then you realize you've got one. And that's what happened when I was floating around after the surgery. That's what happened with this. And the reason I said what I didn't feel was important is what I did, because James must have used all his strength and boom, pulled me back at the same time he relaxed. I probably only got it forward a couple inches at the most because he pulled me back, and I didn't feel that at all. And it must have been pretty forceful, but it just wasn't where my consciousness was in the way my soul was moving. And it's proof that Nate and Chris were feeling the same thing, because what happened after that sensation of the earthquake, and they must have felt the same thing. So they stopped beating on me. They just stopped beating on me and left, which I think is an interesting thing, because most people can imagine, somebody rushing to beat someone else up, because people, it's just like underneath the surface, and they enjoy stoning other people to death, or watching violence on TV, and people could imagine themselves, somebody constricts someone and they're not able to move. They can imagine themselves starting to punch someone, but it's a little more difficult to imagine that there was some sort of cycle in this sort of natural experience where they would leave. But after the earthquake sort of feeling, and I'm sure that was just as natural as them attacking me in the first place, in that stage of this experience. So they left, and I think that was just natural. So then it was just me and James, and he was relaxed, and I was in my own body, and I wasn't in him, and he was letting me move. He was holding me, and I was going like this, and I was moving all over the place because I had all that adrenaline, and the adrenaline made me bounce around because I had all that energy in it. And he was just sort of like moving with me, and his arms were stretching, and he was relaxed, and it was a very loose feeling as compared to the tight feeling when he was restricting me. But after a minute, maybe a little less, a little more than a minute of bouncing around because of the adrenaline, I finally just leaned back on him, and just like before, just leaning on him, and he was just holding me, and it was like this very, very deep and personal experience. It felt like the deepest sort of religious experience, I guess you might say, but the deepest sort of peace. It's like everything was just perfect in the world, and man, it's just like so peaceful. It just felt like the deepest peaceful feeling I ever had. And it's interesting because when this was happening, I was thinking, if the people that on the staff were to see this, it would be something, because they'd be seeing something that was just the absolute complete opposite of what we were doing all day. We were playing these games, and it had this, mean sort of competitive feeling, trying to beat the other guy, and then the boxing was very stressful to me, and it was also like that, very competitive, but it was like this came down to something that was just absolutely the total opposite of that. Just absolutely the opposite. It's just like this very deep, profound peace. And after about a minute of that, my soul decided to move again. So it went to move back in him, and then there's something that happened like in a hundredth of a second. As soon as my soul hit his, he like erupted. Oops. He erupted. I mean, very violently erupted, and threw me forward. And like I said, like with like the earthquake sort of feeling come back, snapping back. It was a very dramatic, sort of forceful feeling. Boom. And so anyway, at that point I was free, and this is kind of fascinating. What James does after this is over, he goes back and he goes in the living room right away to watch the cartoons like nothing happened. And what I do is first thing I do is I check my body all over the place to see if they hurt me at all, and they didn't. I didn't have a scratch, I didn't have a bruise, I didn't have any problems because they were just playing. But it got me excited like the real thing. But anyway, at this point I'm having a totally different reaction than James. He just like goes into the living room to watch TV, and I'm like exhilarated beyond belief. I mean, more exhilarated than I've ever been. There's nothing that could possibly be more exhilarating than what just happened to me. So he goes in here, and I go over here into the lobby that's there. I start walking around these tight circles. Just walking around because it's the adrenaline that was getting me going. And I guess if I could have escaped going in a straight line somewhere, I might have done it. I think the adrenaline was telling me to move out of the way, and so I was just dealing with it that way. And then there was somebody else, I guess, that had the remote control and was watching a different program. So James wasn't able to watch the cartoons because somebody else was watching the TV. So he went into the dining room. This is the dining room area, and there was a TV in there, and he went there because he could get the remote to watch the cartoons. So I'm right here. When he comes in, I want to get away from him. The adrenaline was telling me, get as far away from him as you can. So I moved from this lobby into the family room where the fighting usually started, and I started going in circles like that, and I just felt exhilarated. So about 20 minutes, I'm going around these circles, exhilarated, and then after 20 minutes, I stopped. Well, I'm still in a lot of energy, exhilarated, but my thinking started to change. It was going from just, I guess I was just feeling like running or something, but after about 20 minutes, I started to think about sex instead. I said, God, that was the sexiest thing that ever happened to me. And I've been married twice. I was married to another guy for 6 years. I've had sex thousands of times. So it isn't from a lack of experience, but it was just that thing was just wow. It was just like beyond anything else I've ever experienced. And so I started to think, oh my God, that was the sexiest thing that ever happened to me. And I was thinking, well, the climax at the very end of it, I said, wow, that must have been a hundredth of a second. It was just an unbelievable short amount of time. And then I started thinking, well, it was very, very quick, but it was also very, very intense. And the intensity kind of made up for the lack of time that it was involved. And then I was thinking also, I could still feel it, because even though it was that quick, it had a feeling of a reverberation, like it was still happening. Of course, it wasn't as tense when it first happened, but it was sort of lingering at that time. And, and I was thinking, and what I've learned and, in history classes or watching documentaries about history is that in the ancient world, it was largely believed that being in the military and experiencing battle was a sexual experience. And I've heard that. I had heard that before. But after this happened, I believe, you could bet I believe it. So I'm going around and I'm thinking about this, and every second it starts to become more and more of a kind of sexual experience. So it's like 5-10 minutes of thinking of it as a sexual experience. So, oh my God, I can't stand this any longer. I got to have an orgasm. So I went into my room, and I went and took a shower. I turned the water up as high as I could stand it, and I went and I was beating off, and it took about 20 minutes. I was doing nice, and then I came out of the shower, and I said, "Oh my God, I'm so high," and I used to be an acid freak. Smoked dope every day. Liked to be drunk. And I came out and I said, "Oh my God, I've never even been close to this high." It was a pure adrenaline high that I got from James. It was just an unbelievable drug as well as an unbelievable experience. So I was saying, "Oh my God, I'm just, sky high. I better do something to try to come down a little bit." So I turned out all the lights and I laid down for about a half an hour. And then I got up and I did what I'd normally do on a Saturday. I went and sat next to James watching the cartoons. And it was just the strangest half an hour. I guess it was about 12 o'clock when I did that. And for a half an hour, it was like two adults playing peekaboo. He would, just look at him and we would laugh and smile. And he was just so happy, and so was I. It was the happiest moment of my life, and I'm sure that he was just as happy from looking at it and seeing it in his eyes and his expressions and so forth. And we didn't say a word to each other. Not a single word. And it was just a very strange half hour, but it was the happiest moment of my life. The happiest day was my wedding day, but that was the happiest moment of my life. And we were together for 2 weeks after that until my 60 days were up. And after that had happened, when we started boxing, I felt a lot more relaxed. I didn't feel nervous about it anymore. That seemed to disappear after having that experience. And it was just, I don't know, our relationship was just very good after that. It seemed to be something that was very bonding. So that's it. And that was the only thing that could have beat the after-death experience. It was just great. But another thing about it was that, at that time, for those 2 weeks and maybe a little later, I couldn't have put that experience into words. And I guess James couldn't have either. And neither me nor James are the kind of people that hold back. If we've got an opinion about something, we're not shy in expressing it. And we talk about everything. But that, we never said a word about it. I don't think either one of us had any ability to explain it or to say a word about it. At that time, it was too close to after it happened to be able to talk about it, so we didn't say anything. And it was, I miss him a lot. I want to see him pretty badly. The thing is that, you see, I'm afraid that he might be dead, even though that was 10 years ago. He's 19 at the time, so he'd be 29 now. And he was beautiful and he was very healthy. but he had an addictive personality. I was playing chess with him once, and I was saying to him that I never did crack, and he was like, "Oh, you've got to do crack. You don't know till you experience it yourself." And he was just like very insistent that I had to do it. And and then when you're young, you feel invincible, and you're more likely to be open to experiences like any type of drug that you can get your hand on. And that was kind of the way James was. He had an addictive personality, and then the fentanyl problem with the heroin problem. I said, boy, that's scary, and which is one of the reasons that it'd be so great to see him again, because I'm afraid because of the fentanyl crisis. And it makes me really mad, because I think that the government should provide needles and heroin for people, so that there aren't so many deaths from this crisis. But yeah, I'm definitely looking for him. James, if you're out there, call me. It's also in the Will to Power philosophy that I write in. I felt like I went through a cycle of the power cycle. There was the tension, relaxation, release that I had to experience that people have in war in a 15-minute experience. In a very intense 15 minutes, I learned, the good emotional qualities of war. And that's actually one of the first things I thought after I had that, after I had that explosive release. And I shot forward. I was checking myself, and the first thing I thought was that I had a cycle of power, and that I had experienced all the good qualities of war. And I said to myself, after that experience, I'm never going to say anything bad about war or sports again, which has been half true. I still say bad things about war, or I have more insight to it. Basically, that it's about that there's a preference for ignorance, and that a deep injustice in war, which is the negative things I say about it. But I haven't said anything negative about sports after that. But right after it happened, during the time I was checking myself, a tenth of a second after the feeling of explosion, and it was the first thing I thought. I thought to myself, I will never say anything bad about war or sports again. And he's done a lot to help me. I understand, I think, the cycles of power and the will power a lot more clearly after that experience. But, yeah, it would mean everything to me to find him again. And the thing is, I think the books are going to make a lot of money. So I had this chance to make him a millionaire, because I'm writing Whack Daddy, and it's a story. I tell the story I just told in the book, a lot more detail. There's other stories that happened between me and James that I haven't told, but I did tell that story. And if we find him, he can write 3 chapters. One, what did he do? What did he do? We got him thrown in the hospital in the first place. Then, what he thinks, about this, which would be, another part of this, So, at least what he did, how we found him. That'd be another chapter. Or it might be how we found him, what he did, and then what he thinks. This tape itself, it's a part of how did we find him. I'm just looking for him, and this tape's out for. I did actually went to a private detective, but I had $300, and then I got paid for 2 hours worth of work. So I don't really have the money to do that. But that would definitely be one chapter, finding him. But then the chapter of what he thinks about these ideas. And then we can go back to the very first chapter in the book and do the same thing I did with my wife and my daughter. You give him a double-spaced version of the chapter and some empty pages, and he can just write whatever he wants to write about it and add to it. So he's got this place in the book, and if it sells a lot, it would make a great movie. I'm not sure to call Whack Daddy and His Worst part of the movie. It'd be mostly about my experiences in the hospital for the criminally insane. So laugh about that, or so proud to say that, because not so many people have been there. And it makes a good first line. When I was locked up in the hospital for the criminally insane, that's a good first line. But and you would have a lot to add to the story.